Tonight's story is about a girl named Lila. She started out the way many of us do, bright, hopeful, and convinced that if you tried hard enough, the world would make sense. But life has a way of testing that belief. And sometimes those tests change the way we see everything. The first thing anyone ever noticed about Lila was her laugh. It came out of her like sunlight, bright, sudden, and impossible to ignore. When she was little, she believed the world worked like a playground. If you were kind, people were kind back. If you smiled, someone smiled with you. Simple math. So, she carried joy the way other kids carried backpacks. But the world, as it tends to do, started poking holes in that belief. It started small. A teacher sighing too loudly when Lila asked a question. A classmate rolling their eyes when she got excited about something. Someone whispering that she was too much. Then it grew sharper. Words meant to sting. Labels that stuck like burrs on clothing. Dramatic. Annoying. Wrong. Each time it happened, Lila responded the only way she knew how. She tried harder. She smiled bigger. Laughed louder. Helped more. If someone said she was annoying, she tried to be quieter. If someone said she was dramatic, she tried to be calmer. If someone said she was strange, she tried to become ordinary. But the strange thing about chasing approval is that the finish line keeps moving. Years passed, and the sunshine that once spilled out of her so easily started to fracture. It wasn't obvious at first. From the outside, she still looked bright enough. But inside, hairline cracks had begun spreading, and once cracks begin, pressure finds them. One night, sitting alone in a quiet room, the questions finally surfaced. Why do they not love me? Why am I always the problem? Why does everything I do seem wrong? The questions circled her mind like restless birds. The more she thought about them, the heavier they became. Eventually, exhaustion replaced the questions. Lila leaned back in her chair and stared into the dark window. Outside, the night was quiet and endless. For the first time in her life, she imagined walking away. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly disappearing, like the final note of a song dissolving into silence. There was something peaceful about the thought. Silence, darkness, no more trying. But as that idea drifted through her mind, something unexpected happened. A memory appeared. She saw a small girl sitting cross-legged in a patch of grass, holding a dandelion and blowing its seeds into the wind. The girl was laughing, watching the tiny white parachutes float through the air like miniature stars. It took Lila a moment to realize who she was looking at. It was herself, or rather, the version of herself that existed before the cracks, before the labels, before the world started handing out opinions like they were facts. The little girl in the memory didn't look broken. She looked hopeful. And suddenly, Lila felt something stir in her chest, small but stubborn. "No," she whispered to the empty room. It wasn't a loud declaration. It wasn't dramatic, but it was firm. Because the idea that the people who had cut her down might quietly celebrate her disappearance sparked a fire in her soul. The thought that the small girl with the dandelion would simply vanish from the world felt wrong in a way she couldn't ignore. So instead of disappearing, Lila did something strange. She started watching people, at the grocery store, at work, on sidewalks and park benches. She noticed how the angry man snapping at a cashier had eyes that looked permanently tired. She saw the woman who always criticized others flinch whenever someone complimented her. Pain, she realized, had a habit of leaking out sideways. People who were hurting often didn't know what to do with that hurt, so they handed pieces of it to someone else. It didn't excuse the damage, but it explained some of it. And one afternoon, while wandering through a small art gallery downtown, Lila noticed something curious. A painting hung on the wall. It was chaotic, splashes of color, jagged lines, shapes that didn't quite make sense. A couple nearby were studying it closely. "What do you think it means?" one of them asked. "I'm not sure," the other replied, leaning closer. "But I like it." Neither of them complained that the painting was strange. Neither demanded it look like the others. They didn't call it wrong. They paused. They studied it. They tried to understand it. Lila stood there staring at the canvas when a quiet thought slipped into her mind. Why don't we treat others the way we treat art? When we see art that's unusual, we slow down. We search for meaning. We try to see the emotion behind it, the perspective it carries, the story hidden inside the brushstrokes. We accept that it's different, and sometimes we even celebrate it for that reason. But when we see a person who is different, we rush to judge them. Too loud, too strange, too sensitive, too much. Lila realized she had spent years trying to repaint herself into something easier for others to accept, something smoother, something quieter. But maybe people weren't meant to be identical portraits. Maybe we were meant to be entire galleries, some of us bright and wild with color, some quiet and subtle, some abstract and hard to understand at first glance. And maybe the world would heal a little faster if we approached each other the same way we approach art, with curiosity instead of judgment. So Lila stopped trying to erase the parts of herself that didn't fit neatly into someone else's expectations. Instead, she began learning something far more important: to stand in front of another human being the way someone stands in front of a painting, patiently, thoughtfully, willing to see the beauty in something unfamiliar. Because sometimes the most meaningful things in the world are the ones that take a moment to understand. Stories like Lila's aren't rare. In fact, most of us probably know a version of it, whether it's our own or someone close to us. So wherever you are tonight, I hope it gave you something small to think about. Until next time.